Okay. Hi, welcome everyone. Welcome to Nonfiction Refresh, a look at the 5 kinds of nonfiction. I'm Carolyn Bennett-Glauda, the Librarian for Education and Outreach at Southeastern New York Library Resources Council. In a moment, I'm going to turn our webinar over to our presenter, Meredith Inkeles of Kinry Road Elementary. If any of this feels familiar to you, it's because this is an expanded version of her presentation from CennyCon in April. So before we begin, I'm just going to go over some housekeeping. You are all entering the meeting muted, and we're just going to ask that you stay that way until the end of the presentation when we have a Q&A. You can also turn off your camera if you want in the meantime, and you're keep it on if you want. It's up to you. If you have a question at any time, please feel free to just drop that question into the chat. And if you want to practice by taking a moment right now, you can use the chat to introduce yourself, tell us where you're from, tell us, anything that you feel about nonfiction, and your pronouns, which, by the way, my pronouns are she and hers. So feel free to do that now. We also want to let you know that we are, as you might be seeing, we're offering live captioning of this presentation using the Zoom captioning. So you can toggle it on or off by clicking the live transcript button at the bottom of your screen. It might be hidden in the More menu. That's the menu with the 3 dots. So if you're having any trouble and you need the captions to work, just private message me in the chat and I'll help you out after this introduction. And that goes for any kind of technical problem you might be having. Just private message me and I can try to help you out with that. So as a reminder, what you type into the chat will not be recorded with the video, but the notes are public and we will save a copy of it locally after the event. So we trust that both in the chat and in spoken comments, you'll be courteous and to the other attendees and to our presenter and remain in accordance with Southeastern's Code of Conduct. If we find that anyone's using the chat in an abusive or threatening way, we will remove you from the webinar. So as you can see, we are recording this presentation and we will make it available to you in a few days and we'll email you the link at the address that you used to register. In addition, we will have CE certificates available upon request and keep an eye on the chat for those. I'll drop a link for the CE request form and the course evaluation at the end of the webinar. Meredith has also made the presentation notes and materials available to you. And she's been dropping those in the chat so that you can have them. And if you don't happen to grab them during this presentation, I will also email those to you following the presentation. So with that, I just want to again thank you for being here with us today and thank you for all the work that you're doing to keep libraries vital and relevant. We really appreciate what you're doing. And Meredith, it is all yours.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So welcome to Nonfiction Refresh, the 5 kinds of nonfiction. And this is about the evolution of children's nonfiction. We're really going through a golden age of children's nonfiction right now. So I just want to show you that the goal for today is to...
Sorry, Meredith, I muted you by accident when I was trying to let someone in from the waiting room.
That's okay. Let me just make sure I'm not muted.
I can hear you.
Okay, good. All right. So learn about the 5 kinds of nonfiction, become familiar with the terminology, and see some examples of exemplar texts. So first, we're going to start off with the actual book itself, 5 Kinds of Nonfiction by Melissa Stewart and Marlene Correia. And I have to admit, I leave this in my school bag and I just bring it back and forth from school to home at any given time. It's in my grasp and I can look up information. It's a fantastic book. Then we're going to go into the different kinds of nonfiction: traditional, browsable, narrative, expository literature, active. And then of course but wait, there's more. There's blended nonfiction because not everything fits into a nice little box. We're going to talk about what the publishing companies are doing and why this information is so important. And I just want to point out this image right here where it says the 5 kinds of nonfiction. It lists all the different kinds, and the books that are in the red box, those have expository writing styles. So 4 of the 5 are expository writing styles, whereas only 1, narrative nonfiction, is of course a narrative writing style. And at the bottom, there's a link to a blog that Melissa Stewart wrote if you want more background information. She pretty much sums up most of this book in that blog post. So that's just something that you can, if you have the slides in front of you or you're saving them, that you can just go ahead and read that when you want to get the general overview. So to start with, the book itself, one of the most fascinating things that Melissa and Marlene found is that if you ask an adult, and they asked a number of adults, what's your favorite type of writing style? Is it expository? Is it narrative? Or is it both? Well, an adult, only 8% of adults said that they liked reading expository writing styles, whereas they preferred narratives. Adults want a story. They want a character that they can cheer for and get to know. Whereas if you ask a child, specifically a younger child, like kindergarten, first, second, third grade, they want expository. They want information. You figure they've only been on this earth for a short time. They're still trying to figure out the world, and they want to read factual information to learn about what's going on. So 42% of children chose expository as a writing style, whereas only 25% chose narrative. Sometimes they're not ready to emotionally commit to a specific character or some type of story. They're still in, I'm learning about the world. I want to know things that are fact-based. So I just found that absolutely fascinating. And this is important because think about when we do read alouds. How often when we do read alouds, do we pick something that's a story to share, a beginning, a middle, and end? Or when we're doing reader's advisory, typically most people tend to go towards fiction books, seeing what children want, assuming because we as adults would rather have a story that they want to have a story. So this is just a fascinating little tidbit of information that really leads you off in the beginning of this book and some of the reasons as to why it's so important. And then just at the bottom of the slide, there's Melissa's website where, especially if you're in a classroom or if you're doing some type of hands-on activity that goes with the book, she has a plethora of just this gold mine of resources, of ideas, and different activities that you can do with all of her books. And Melissa's blog, I can't click on it now because my district blocks it, but it is fantastic. There are a number of blog posts. Some of them are written by Melissa. Some of them are written by guest blog hosts, guest bloggers, and just fascinating reads about what different people are doing. And then, of course, you can follow Melissa Stewart and Marlene on Twitter. So that's information is just there for you. So this was from the blog post that I had mentioned earlier. And I just think this quote really gets to the heart of it. The 5 kinds of nonfiction classification system brings clarity to the way we think about nonfiction. We're used to subdividing our fiction section into genres like mysteries and science fiction. But then we just lump all the nonfiction together. Now we can see smart, useful ways to categorize these books. So it is like having your fiction genres. It's sort of like having a nonfiction genre. It's not the same idea, but you know, trying to wrap your head around this concept of what are we doing by categorizing these books? I mean, we're all used to, oh, we're going to categorize by the Dewey Decimal System with the spine label and where it is on the shelf. But this takes it a little further because this is a way that not only are we lumping them together sort of like genres, but it's helping us to look at and for our patrons to understand What went into making that book? The craftsmanship of the book, the characteristics of the book, and how certain books that are in the same kind tend to have similar characteristics, just like we would talk about with genres. So this I just thought was an interesting little tidbit to share with you when, if you do go back and read this blog post, you'll see this, and it just really kind of gets to the heart of it. So speaking of getting to the heart of it, let's jump right in and start talking about what the different types of nonfiction are. So we start with traditional nonfiction. Now, I know when I was in school, if you went to the nonfiction section of the library, they were thick, dusty, not pretty, hard-covered, black and white pictured, text-heavy books. They were not fun. But traditional books now, they have some of those features, of course, but this is now, you're thinking about your survey books. You're all about books. These are the kinds of books that you have your abdo, your capstone. This one, the series part is torque, where, you know, every book, say, is 32 pages long. There's a table of contents. There's a glossary, an index. You know, there's always the same type of format. But this is your overview of a topic. This is, you want to know a little bit about everything, and then you're going to find something that piques your interest in this book to then narrow down your topic of what you're interested in. These are the books that if a student comes in because they're doing research, we tend to have them start with these types of books. So you can see, I showed you monster vehicles, excuse me, rivers and streams. Of course, all the Seymour Simon books, all the Gail Gibbons books. So the great thing about these books is the reading level isn't necessarily high. It's clear. Children can understand what's being said. And it's written as an expository writing style. So the purpose of it is to inform and tell the reader about information. So traditional nonfiction, you can all think of different traditional nonfiction books that you have in your collection. But now it's nice to know, oh, it has an actual name. So that's always helpful. So traditional is where we're starting. From there, we're going to browsable nonfiction. These are the books that your students, your patrons love. So these are eye-catching. The kids love that you don't have to read them in order. You can skip around. You can just open up to a random page and start reading. You don't even have to necessarily read the page the way we normally would, from left to right, up to down. You can just read little boxes, just look at pictures. So browsable nonfiction is going to have little short blocks of text. You're not reading huge pages worth of text going on and on. You can read it in any order. These are the books that you're going to see a whole bunch of kids gathered around looking at different things. You know, every time there's a Guinness Book of World Records, that everybody is together. They're all, oh, look at that. Oh, look at those ugly fingernails. And, you know, these are the books that kids want to share with each other, that kids who have a hard time reading will enjoy these books because they can skip around. The images will help them be able to understand if they don't necessarily comprehend all of the text. And again, it's an expository writing style, so it's here to inform you. So that's browsable nonfiction. This is one of the top two favorite of most students. Oh, and I just wanted to point out, a lot of the browsable nonfiction really starts with the eyewitness books. They started with the birth of desktop publishing. They started in the late 80s, early 90s where you have the photographs and the little images and the captions and the tiny paragraphs. And from there, that's how it all started, and things started to expand after that. So let's hear it for the eyewitness books. And actually, I just noticed that they're redoing them so that they don't all look ancient and falling apart. So that's just something you might want to look for. Now, narrative nonfiction, these are the books that are just like a story. There's a beginning, a middle, an end. You can go over a setting, the characters. This is the only kind of nonfiction that actually is a narrative writing style. And these are books that are either about people, so biographies, or about some kind of event or a process. And so right here, I'm holding up the People's Painter. So this was the Cybert winner this year. Most of the narrative nonfiction books are the ones that tend to win book awards. And they tend to be if a teacher or a librarian is going to go ahead and read a nonfiction book, it's typically a narrative nonfiction. Again, it's nonfiction, it's meticulously researched, it's verifiable and truthful information, but it feels like a story. So it gives us the prefer narratives or fiction. It gives us that sense of comfort, but at the same time, it's giving us factual information. The nice thing about this too is these books tend to go in chronological order. So again, following the narrative arc that you have in your regular fiction, this will go in that order as well. And this is where you find at the back of the book the extra information, or you find the timeline, or I love when they show photographs of the people, so you can show your students or your patrons, oh, look, here's what she looked like. Here's a picture of, so-and-so getting an award. And they can see that, yes, this is a real person. It's not just an interesting story. So narrative nonfiction, this is the one, not the most popular with kids, but the most popular usually with the adults. Now, expository literature, this is the one that has completely stolen my heart. Expository literature is just so different. There's usually one specific narrow topic. So for example, if you want a friend in Washington, it's only about presidential pets. It's not about all pets. It's not about presidents, specifically presidential pets. Or Crossings, which is one of my absolute all-time favorite expository literature books. Crossings, if anybody has this book, is fantastic, and it's only narrow topic of crossings that humans built to help protect animals. Pink is for blobfish. That whole series by Jess Keating is fantastic, expository literature. And what makes them so different from all other nonfiction is that it's a strong voice. It's not like the traditional where it's very matter of fact and clear. It can be practically poetic. And on top of that, there are multiple layers of text. So for example, this is Summertime Sleepers, Animals That Estivate by Melissa Stewart and illustrated by Sarah Brannon. This won a Cybert Honor Award this year. I highly recommend this book because it's fascinating, because everybody's like, well, we know about hibernation, but we have no idea what estivation is, and this helps you learn. But when you look inside, there are 3 different areas where there's text. So there's this whole story that goes through the beginning. It kind of follows you along, and it's like almost like a story. And then you have the scientific drawing, like from a sketchbook, and it gives you other information, like here's a blown up image of the ladybug, but here's what it would look like in actual size, talks about where you can find it. But then over here at the bottom, there's another layer of text, and now it's just giving you some factual information about it. So you have your lyrical language, you have kind of a scientific language, and then you have your factual language. So the books that are set up this way tend to have a lot of layers. For example, Pink is for Blobfish. I think there's at least 4 layers of text per page for children to read. So it's just fascinating because the ideas are so specialized. You're reading about something that you probably had no idea about before. And it's just done in such a beautiful way. The text is amazing. The language is beautiful to read. The illustrations or the photographs are captivating. They're just really different books. And I highly recommend any of the ones that are on the screen right now. And I know a lot of my students, they love the What If You Had animal teeth or animal ears. And those books are fun for them to read, and they will read them cover to cover and look at the illustrations. But because it's in the expository format, it really makes a difference. So, reading one of these books can be just as fascinating as reading an exciting picture book, because there's always the gross factor. You can never go wrong with the gross factor with kids, especially like Pink is for Blobfish and things are like runny and mucusy and things like that. But you can always do that. But some of it is just so fascinating. Even with What If You Had Animal Teeth, where it talks about, well, if you had, teeth like a snake, what would you do? And how it's related back to the children themselves, that they just find it fascinating. And, these are the kinds of books where maybe you read one of these, say, if you want a friend in Washington and you read about the pets, well, maybe that's going to pique someone's interest into learning about a different president or learning about a specific animal or diving deeper into the different pets that were there. So it's a great starting off point. They're interesting to read. And as you can see, because I'm going on, that expository literature is my favorite. So I will move on to the next one. Active nonfiction. Now, this is, I think, the tie for first place for children. So active nonfiction is up there with browsable nonfiction. So some kids literally just cannot sit and read. But if they're reading and that reading is telling them how to do something or they're learning something, now they've got the right combination. And now we're able to bring them in, get them reading, but still doing so they don't have to sit still or fidget. So these are all of your origami books, your cookbooks, your drawing books. This includes any of the field guides, because of course, like say you've got the seashell one and you're at the beach, you'd collect a shell and you find it in the guidebook and then read it. The origami one, you've always got kids that want to try origami, so that one works. And now you have a lot of the computer coding books and ones that I can't keep on the shelf, any of the ones that deal with how to play Minecraft or any other video games, they want them all. But also I want you to notice the book, You're Invited to a Mothball. That is an active nonfiction book. It doesn't necessarily read like you would normally expect an active nonfiction to read, but as you're reading it, all of a sudden it's like, oh, here's an activity that you should try. So as you go through, it's all of your basic science experiment books would also be active nonfiction. And that's what You're Invited to a Mothball. There's a new book out. I just got it over the summer. It's called Funky Fungi. And you read about the fungus and everything that's there and all the mushrooms. And then all of a sudden they're like, hey, start your own fungus journal or, go on a fungus hunt. And there's all of these activities that are included. So any of your craft books, your cookbooks, your drawing books, this is what a lot of kids want. This is the type of book that, if a teacher sends a student down and says, everybody needs to get a nonfiction book, you always have to be like, Active nonfiction doesn't count. Your teacher doesn't want this kind of book. They usually want a traditional nonfiction, but this is definitely up there with the browsable nonfiction for some of the favorites that students like. And then of course there's but wait, there's more, because not everything just fits. And the one thing to remember with the 5 kinds, Melissa Stewart isn't saying everything has to be categorized into one of the 5 kinds. You could have 2 people read the same book and they might think it belongs in 2 different categories. So a lot of it is subjective. I mean, there's certain ones that, like, there's no doubt. Most traditional nonfiction, you can tell right away. Active nonfiction, you can tell right away. But sometimes it might overlap. It could be expository and active. It could be expository and browsable. Well, as it says in the 5 kinds of nonfiction, a very wise 4th grader said, I think you should add an oddball category. It's for the books that are a mix of 2 or more categories, which is like brilliant. Brilliant, Austin. Thank you. So here are just 3 examples of books that would fit in the blended category. So Birds of a Feather, Bowerbirds and Me, if anybody has read that or has it. It's an autobiographical book, but it's not nonfiction. Usually when anything is biography related, it tends to be narrative nonfiction. But this is really writing about Susan Roth, writing about her life, but comparing things that she's doing and what's happening to her with the Bowerbirds at the same time. So it's a completely new type of book. So it doesn't fit into one or the other. It just counts as blended. Giant Squid by Candace Fleming. This book has equal amounts of expository and narrative text. So as you're reading, you're getting your facts, but it's like a narrative of the squid. So you're like, okay. And then at the back, and this is even makes it even more of a blended, there's a whole spread, a 2-page spread of the giant squid, and it's labeled with all the different parts. And that even looks more browsable than anything else. So then you've got that added in. So when you really can't pinpoint something, it's going to be blended. Then we have Zombie Makers. I pulled this one off the shelf. I don't know if anybody has ever read this book, True Stories of Nature's Undead, but it was nasty, which means the kids love it. I was totally grossed out by it, but they love it. But this book, every time you go to read about a different animal, well, first it tells you are zombies real? But then when you go to read about an animal, they're like, oh, and then here's this animal and it's flying and it's doing this. And you're learning this story about it. And then all of a sudden it's like, you know, and then a fungus has been inserted into its head and all the little baby beetles grow out of its head. And you're like, oh my gosh, what is going on in this book? So it's got the narrative hook. There's the story. And you're like, oh my gosh, you know, things are crawling out of somebody else's body and there's a parasite. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, and then there's the factual information about it. What's its name? Who makes it a zombie? Where can you find it? And you get that expository explanation of the actual facts. So whenever you have all of these mixed together types of books, then you have your blended nonfiction. All right, so interestingly enough, I've heard Melissa Stewart actually say, publishers are actually working more towards the blended idea. They want to see books where, say, it's written as expository literature, but it's an active nonfiction because the kids are going to do something with it. And if those are the 2 most popular books that tend to be selling, they figure if you combine the 2 together, they're going to make more money. So that's something that you might start noticing coming down the pike, where you find more and more different narrative blended nonfiction. And it's interesting because if you remember how I mentioned the Doran Kinderly's, the eyewitness books, you'll find if you've been doing this a long time, you will have noticed that children's nonfiction, all of a sudden, everything started to look like a website. There were little boxes, everything was bright and colorful. There was space, there were graphics, there were pictures, there were images, there were charts, and everything was leaning more towards looking like a website instead of looking like a regular traditional nonfiction book. And that was kind of the forerunner of this whole explosion in the nonfiction children's literature field. So that's just, we've seen all of these things happen as time goes on. Another thing was, for example, with the expository literature, that started around the time that No Child Left Behind was put into place, and Common Core, where they wanted children to read 50-50 of fiction and nonfiction. And people started experimenting with the different kinds of nonfiction to make them more exciting and accessible for children. And that's how you started the beginnings of expository literature. Now, speaking of publishers, the publishing companies are hopping on this bandwagon. So some of them are actually linking or selling books based on the 5 kinds of nonfiction. So I just want to show you some of these. So for example, I forgot I pulled this page up. This is the page where there's the blog that I mentioned on like the first couple of slides, where you can look through and you basically get the entire sum up of all of what Melissa Stewart is doing with the 5 kinds of nonfiction. But let's start with Capstone. So under the librarian section, if you scroll down a little, you can see it says types of nonfiction, and it talks about Melissa and the book, and it explains the different categories, and it lets you click on different books that fit that category. So if you say, oh, I'm looking for traditional nonfiction, here's an example that you can buy from Capstone that's traditional nonfiction. And it does it for all of the different categories that you might be interested in. Okay, so that's what Capstone's doing. Now, Heinemann, I love this, rethinking your book collection. So it gives you a little bit of background information, and then it goes into what the 5 kinds are, gives you some bullets from Melissa Stewart. Okay, so just a little, this is part of their blog. So the fact that they even used any of their space for this, I figure is a positive and a good idea. Now, Learner is full-fledged on board with the 5 kinds of nonfiction. They have this entire page that explains everything. They have little posters you can print out. And it's nice because they have a large selection. Of course, I'm going to go to expository literature because it's my favorite. And you're going to be able to say, oh, anybody get this book? I love it. I just ordered it. So I have this one too. Just got it. It's absolutely beautiful. Make Way for Animals is another great one. So you can see, you can use this website to either order books yourself or see if any books that you already have fit into one of these categories. Okay, so Learner does a nice job with what they have. And then with Mackin, they also, like Heinemann, had Melissa do a guest blog post to share the idea of what the 5 kinds of nonfiction are. So this is just something else that you can look through, and it's just fun to see the different examples that they give of what the different books are in the different categories. And you can see it's different levels, it's different books. So that's just a blog post that's there if you want to take a look and read. So those are all the publishing companies. So the biggest thing we really need to talk about, though, is why is this important? Why are we bothering? Why are we talking about this? What is the purpose? So one thing that I like is I would love if we could make this a common vocabulary. So this would include authors, educators, librarians, patrons, publishers, students. Because right now, everybody uses something different. Some people say nonfiction. Some people say informational text. You could say informational text, and to a librarian, that means one thing. To a classroom teacher, that means something completely different. So that's one of the things we have to hold on to is if we're all talking about the same thing, it's going to make it easier. And if we start instilling this narrative of the vocabulary words, especially with the children, they're then able to express to us what it is that they're really looking for. So the next thing about why this is important is children can successfully interact with a broad range of nonfiction texts by understanding these categories. If they know what kind of nonfiction text they want, and they know, oh, well, I'm doing this assignment and I need a traditional nonfiction, they're going to be able to then go to the library, get help from a librarian, and find the book that they really do need. Or, maybe they're thinking, oh, I'm gonna participate in the science fair. All right, I need to find an active nonfiction book that has the science experiments, maybe chemistry experiments, whatever it is that they want to do. So that boosts their confidence because they know what they want and they're able to express what it is that they want. And then they're going to be successful in finding what they want. So that's always a positive on all levels. Now, the third reason why this is important is that by knowing what the student likes, for them knowing what they like and what suits maybe their learning style, their reading style, this is giving children agency over what they read. It is so important for students to have that agency and to feel that independence and to not have books forced on them that they don't want to read. This is so important. It's all about their choice. When you say you're doing a project and, the teacher assigns a topic to a student. Well, if it's not a topic they like, they're not going to enjoy the process. They're not going to enjoy what they read. They might not overall learn anything because they have no interest. But when they get to pick the topic, or if it's a large topic and they get to narrow down and pick what specifically they want, what they're interested in, then they own that. They want to know. They want to become that expert. So that's why them having that agency is really important. And then the other part is children want nonfiction books. It's that simple. We saw the percentages of what younger children want. I actually, last school year, right after I read the 5 Kinds of Nonfiction, I actually went ahead and did the whole, this is what a narrative writing style is. This is what a narrative nonfiction writing style is. Which one do you prefer? And everybody wrote it down on a Post-it note and put it up on a chart and everything like that. And I noticed that the older students always opted for the narrative. And the younger students wanted the expository writing style, which was great because I'm like, oh, good, it fits in with the statistics. But they do want nonfiction books. And I don't know if anybody has seen on Twitter or on any other of the social medias, there was a petition that was going around, and it's the hashtag Kids Love Nonfiction. And it was asking a petition. I had signed it. There were like over 2,000 people who signed it, asking the New York Times if, instead of, when you look at their book reviews and their stars and everything that they have for the books, there are so many adult categories. Whereas when it comes to children's literature, it's just children's books. It's not separating out fiction from nonfiction. So the petition was asking for a separate nonfiction. So having a fiction and a nonfiction category. They wouldn't do it. They didn't have the people, they didn't think that there was an interest in it. So it's still being pushed. You'll still see on social media the hashtag kids love nonfiction. So definitely be on the lookout for that. There's a definite push going for nonfiction. There are lots of different ways, as librarians, we have magical ways of talking about a book where all of a sudden 5 kids want to read the same book because we were enthusiastic about it, because we went ahead and did a lesson on it or did a fun activity that went with it, or were just enthusiastic about it at all. And now all of a sudden they want to read books. So typically we're doing that with fiction books and stories that are coming out. But now we can do that with nonfiction books too, to get those nonfiction books into the hands of children. So lots of important reasons. So I just want to share with you that for all of the books that were mentioned in the slideshow, there's a works cited here that you can look at. And it specifies at the end of each one what kind of nonfiction it is, whether it's active, browsable, expository literature. We've got a couple blended in there. So this is about 5 or 6 pages long. But if there were any books that you liked or wanted to know more about, then here's just a bibliography of everything that was mentioned in the slide deck, if it's something that you're interested in. And then I also just want to let you know, because as some people know, I have been like obsessed with this book since I got it in July of 2021. And I feel like it is my mission to share this information with the world. So I am also doing a book study. If you're interested, it's starting October 20th. And then we meet again on November 3rd and November 17th. And the link is there if you want to sign up for it. It's on Zoom and you get 5 hours of credit from 3:30 to 5:30. So that's just there if you're interested. So now that I have talked your ears off, does anybody have any questions? You can raise, I think you can raise your hand if you want to say something, or you could always put it in the chat.
Could I ask a quick question?
Of course.
So I know you mentioned in the beginning that a lot of, because I find this, I'm a K-5 librarian. I find a lot of the brand new books that I've purchased from, say, Torque or Abdo for nonfiction, and possibly maybe I'm not looking at the browsable enough with a narrative, but when I get a lot of the 32-page books that the kids love. They're bright colors, and I bought, like, say, a series on sharks. So one was bull sharks. I forget if it was what publisher it was, but one was Bull Sharks, one was another different shark, and they all tend to be 32 pages that the kids love, but maybe that I'm not looking at the right type of books.
No,
I wonder, like, you know, is that, because like you said, the traditional books when we were younger were a lot bigger. Is 32 pages like enough, or is that like, what about the older kids, fourth and fifth graders? Is that still where a lot of these kids are today, where they want these quick, you know, where they'll read about bull sharks, they only want about the 32 pages. I learned about bull sharks, now I want to learn about something else. You know, do people find that to be okay? I know,
absolutely, it's okay.
I find that that's probably more of how students read, right? Or get their information.
It is.
Instead of reading these bigger, I mean, they're beautiful, but I wonder, like, oh, should I be looking for other publishers that have bigger books that are longer than the 32 page? Or is that about where you want to be across the board on the different types of nonfiction you want?
I think especially like K through 5, that age range, this is just perfect.
Okay.
It gives them basic information. I mean, if they want to learn just for themselves and read it, it's the perfect book. If they're using it for a project or an assignment, you know they're going to have to use multiple sources anyway.
Right.
So even if they don't get everything, it's okay. But these are almost like the gateway books.
Okay.
You know, instead of the gateway drugs, the gateway books of, you know, if you give them, especially in that age range, something like this, and they're able to read it cover to cover and get some of that information, it's fantastic, because then as they get into 6th grade, into middle school, you know, you're slowly transitioning them into larger and more text heavy books as they get older. But when they're first learning, or they're just learning for their own experience, these books are fantastic.
Okay. And then one other note, when you were talking about narrative, about people, I tend, because a lot of my books, I feel like I have to weed out. A lot of my nonfiction go on and on. They're black and white and they go on for pages, or they're just so old and long. And then some of the narrative books, I'm like, oh, I think some about the biography section, and my biography section is old also and needs to be weeded. But I've purchased books such as the Shark Lady and the Dinosaur Lady, which I think would fit more in the narrative, right? And it reminds me of like a picture book, but it's nonfiction. So like you said, reading to kids during story time instead of picking up a picture book. When I think of some of these different narrative books, I think of such as the Shark Lady, because it looks sort of picture booky, but it's nonfiction.
Exactly. And the great thing about the narrative nonfiction, especially if it's the picture book kind, you know, whereas like all 13 is a longer book with chapters and everything like that. But if you pick up one of the picture books, they're fascinating, and they're the perfect length to read for a story time or during a class, because you don't want to have such a long book that the kids get fidgety, that they're not interested. But there's so many fascinating picture book biographies out there that fit under narrative nonfiction, fascinating people that have done fascinating things, that it keeps the students' interest. They want to read, they want to hear it, and then they want to see, because it's a picture book, the beautiful illustrations. So you still have that wonderful feeling like you would if you were reading a picture book, a regular fiction picture book, but now you're sharing information with them instead of just sharing a story.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Maureen. Anybody else have any questions? You can just unmute or put it in the chat. See if I missed anything in the chat. Oh, I know everybody thinks, someone had said this is incredibly helpful for planning conversations with kids and parents about nonfiction reading materials. I mean, because of I'd like to refer to it as, because of our trauma as children and the nonfiction, I mean, at least for me, you know, in the late 70s, early 80s, the nonfiction books were horrible. You did not want to pick them up. And I think a lot of parents and adults still have that kind of experience, and that's what they think of when they think of nonfiction. And so being able to explain to them that, well, now there are these 5 different kinds, they're all different writing styles, different characteristics, it really makes a difference and helps them embrace the nonfiction. I mean, so many times people are like, oh, don't you want this new chapter book? Or, oh, what about this book in this series that you read? And you might actually have what they call an info kit. Info kids are kids who love to read nonfiction. They want to learn nonfiction. Some people, they were info kids, they grew up, they still only read nonfiction. So some people just have that they love, and some people don't. And then some people are in the middle. So it's great having all of these different types of nonfiction now, knowing that it's different, it's interesting, it's engaging, it's going to be something fascinating. And I have to admit, when watching Jeopardy with my mother, that a lot of times I'll get an answer correct and she's like, how do you know that? And I'll be like, I read it in a kid's book. So there's always that possibility that you could have that experience as well. So it's true. Actually, I don't remember who it was, but somebody who was a recent Jeopardy champion actually said that they did a lot of their research reading children's books. So there is some truth to that. So any other questions or comments? Anything anybody wants to share? Don't forget that in the chat that Carolyn put the link for the evaluation. And if you need a CE certificate, there's a link there too. And thanks, Rebecca. Rebecca Gerald had shared for me that tomorrow I am on the Learner and School Library Journal panel about increasing nonfiction and ways to do that. So for most of us, it's during the school day, which is an issue, or if you're in a public library, it might be in the middle of your shift and you're working. So you can always sign up for it if you want to see it, and they'll record it and you'll get the link for it later on.
All right, well, Meredith, I'll give people another minute to see if they have any questions or anything, but while that's wrapping up, I just wanted to say thank you so much. This was really great. And I am gonna go read all my kids' nonfiction. And I'm super jealous because I think, yeah, in my childhood, we had the Guinness Book of World Records and it was black and white.
Yes.
And that was like the beginning and the end. And now there's so much wonderful stuff. And I do like very, very out of date books in my library of like, someday we'll walk on the moon. It was like,
I know. That's one of the best things to do, is just weed your nonfiction. I mean, if I don't even want to look at it or read it, I know my students aren't going to want to read it. If it's too old, get rid of it. I'm finding a lot of my typical biographies that nobody reads, I'm replacing with narrative nonfiction picture book biographies.
Yeah. Actually, that's a question I have. Are you finding that some of them are are having outdated information? Are you able to sort of check your collection for up-to-date information?
It takes a while. It takes a while to make sure you do. I mean, some of them, like if the copyright date is 1967, you're like, yeah, that has to go. But you just have to kind of keep on top. Like, remember when Pluto was no longer deemed a planet, and you had to go, oh my gosh, I have to replace all my Pluto books. And, you just have to kind of keep up on that. Oh, I see Linda mentioned, yes, the old style World Almanac that was in huge, thick black and white. Definitely not fun. No.
Yeah, we got a DVD, a science DVD that I was playing for my kids, and it was a Bill Nye thing that was pre-Pluto being demoted. And I remember they were like watching it and I was in the other room. I'm like, that's not true. I'm like screaming. I'm like, wrong facts, wrong facts.
Yes. Yes. Don't listen. Don't listen. This has changed.
All right. Well, I'm seeing the chat starting to calm down, and it's a beautiful day out. If you're here live, if you're watching this recorded, I hope you had a beautiful day on this Thursday or Wednesday. It's Wednesday. Meredith, thank you so much. If anyone has any follow-up questions, there's your email right there, and I will send the recording and the information packet out to everybody as soon as we get it up and get the closed captioning fixed up and everything. So want to thank everyone for being here, and Meredith, thank you. And
Thank you.
we hope to see you all soon.
Thanks so much.